I have a really interesting episode for you this time. It's a bit of a different pace on the anthropology of relationship paradigms, ancient history, the early goddess tradition, the Cathars, Montsegur in the south of France, the Holy Grail, the Temple of Solomon, feminine power, the Crusades, the Inquisition. If any of those topics interest you, then you will probably love listening to this conversation. I personally find ancient history really important to know about in how it helps reveal future possibilities, in knowing about things that are not common knowledge. And Richard Stanley, here he kindly indulged my questions around social structures and historical dynamics that hold the patriarchal paradigm in place. And he took me into the history based on the location where he lives in the south of France, including telling me that the word romance, was invented in the 12th century there in France. And prior to that, there was no word for it, it was not in language. So, this very soulful man has an endlessly fascinating mind, which I really, really appreciate. We, in fact, share the same birthday, I just realized. He is a really engaging storyteller. I could speak with him for a very long time, and we actually did, even beyond the recording that you're about to hear. I attempted to edit it down a bit to make it shorter, but actually everything in it is essential in the context of this conversation. So while it might be long, it is definitely well worth listening to. And so I bring you the anthropologist, filmmaker in the horror genre associated with names you might recognize, such as H.P. Lovecraft, a documentarian, an esoteric historian, author, and actor, Richard Stanley. Welcome to this provocative and heartfelt podcast, where patriarchy is defined as a paradigm that both men and women uphold in different ways. Here you get to listen in on genuine conversations between leaders from around the world to discover more mutual respect and less division, as well as more pleasure and love in your life. My name is Devashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these Beyond Patriarchal Sex conversations. You have a very extensive, interesting, unique work history and background. So I'm going to really encourage everyone to read about that in the notes. But you are an author and you are a filmmaker, and I think you studied archaeology as well. I heard someone refer.
Anthropology at the beginning.
Oh, sorry, anthropology. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, my mum was an anthropologist. So, being a child of the 60s.
You have a very extensive, interesting, unique work history and background. So I'm going to really encourage everyone to read about that in the notes. But you are an author and you are a filmmaker, and I think you studied archaeology as well. I heard someone refer.
Anthropology at the beginning.
Oh, sorry, anthropology. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, my mum was an anthropologist. So, being a child of the 60s and 70s, I was initially seized with a desire to follow in her steps and to be an anthropologist or an ethnobotanist. But yeah, sadly, the political situation in the world made that impossible.
Mhm. Yes. And I mean, you could talk on quite a range of things, and you have so many stories, I've noticed. But it's a very particular way that I came to even coming across you and your book, and just where you live and what you're dedicated to. So I wondered if we could start there and see where this takes us. Because mostly women are listening in to this podcast. And the women's work that I do is, it's very sacred. I don't want to talk about it too much in a public space, but this podcast is for the side conversations and a way to bring men into these conversations as well. And rather than just look into ways that have been done before around how can we as women really live from our sovereignty, especially when it comes to our relationship with ourselves. That's the nature of my work for the most part, but also with each other, with conscious intimacy, conscious relationships. And something that I've been tracking is bringing a lot of awareness to the paradigm of what I'm calling patriarchal sex, which is intimacy, relationship, the whole thing, the whole social structure around it as well. And in my inquiry into this, I came across um, some awareness and that messages that people have put out there around romantic love and where that came from. And that's actually how I made the connection between, this medieval era in France and the Cathars, which I'm very aware of before that as well. But how they are opposing forces in a sense, that the Cathars were not advocating for that. And they were coming from a place of more purity, pure love. That's not about binding someone into like a semi spell and positioning themselves and each other in a social system that might not have awakening and sovereignty as the highest priority. And so I started hunting more into the Cathars and what they're about. And I also realized how it's actually opposing what many women believe about the Mary Magdalene connection with the Cathars as well. Um, and I find that very interesting because a lot of my life choices and direction and work, you could say that might be a preference, that I might like to believe that. But it seems like it's a bit of a fantasy, and there's a number of fantasies all within this that I'm currently looking at. And yeah, requested your insights and your deep experience with especially the Cathars. Yeah.
Well, I guess a good base idea to start with is that among their beliefs, the Cathars certainly believe that we are living in a fantasy, that we are living in an illusion. As in Buddhism, the material world is the realm of Maya,
Yeah.
the realm of illusion. So, trying to differentiate between fact and fiction and fantasy is quite difficult. And I've found since embarking on this quest that a great many things that I assumed to be true turned out to be fiction. And at the same time, a lot of things I had always been told were fiction surprisingly turned out to be true. So there's definitely a weird slide area between the two, and I would be the last person to say that's real and that's not. But they're all ideas which are worth feeling into. I mean, one of the weirder thoughts is that the whole concept of romance and romantic love wasn't really identified until the 12th century. Nobody had a name for it.
Mhm.
Our word romance is a relatively recent idea, and I'm sure that love must have existed before the 12th century. But in a way, the romance was invented here in what's now the south of France, but what was then Satania pretty much in the 12th century. The normal way of things up to that time and to that time is very much like the way it is in, say, present day Afghanistan. From the point of view, it was a feudal system. Every river valley had its own lord and its own castle, which guarded that valley. And pretty much all marriages were arranged and were usually arranged by the village elders, by the and always for strategic purposes, for land to build ties and defensive ties with the valley next door. People would marry their cousins to the people in the next castle. So the whole region was basically, yeah, held together by an extended family. And most of these these bloodlines, particularly the aristocratic bloodlines, were very much micromanaged by by the town elders, by the leaders of that time. So the notion of falling in love and marrying out of love, and romance was and probably still is in places like present day Afghanistan, kind of a an alien concept, and something the troubadours sang about, but which all too often was impossible. People were usually promised to their cousins, or to one lord or another, before they were even born. And in a way that kind of worked, which was odd. It's a system that actually functioned for centuries and centuries. And one of the little known details of that time period, Old Occitania before the Crusade, is they were kind of remarkably advanced in terms of equal rights. I'm not saying they were a matriarchy, but certainly women were held equal power and could officiate as priests, could inherit land and command armies, and children could take their mother's surnames, which are all remarkable things for that point in time. This is the 11th and 12th century,
But
and
that wasn't across for everyone, was it? Was this was more within the Cathars?
the Cathars. I mean, it's a tricky word because I don't think the word existed back then,
Yes,
and
that
I
too.
think this has been used by modern day academics to basically discredit an awful lot of stuff, and so I don't want to be picked on by internet pedants saying, "Hey, they never existed," because back in the 11th and 12th centuries, they just thought they were ordinary people, that they were good Christians, and didn't realize that what they were doing was heretical, or I don't know how long this tradition of women officiating as priests have been going on for. But the so-called Cathars themselves believe that it's a tradition that came down from the time of John the Baptist and the Essenes, the proto-Christianity that existed before Christ. So that's a really long lineage, and it might have been something that had been functioning for a super long time. And also by the 12th century, we had something here called the Courts of Love. And I don't know if you're familiar with Frank Herbert's Dune, but in the successful movies based upon them. But our Occitanian Courts of Love were very much a sort of 12th century version of the Bene Gesserit from Dune. It was a secret society, basically a sort of quasi-Masonic court, which held session once or twice a year, usually in the spring times, comprised of all of the richest and noblest ladies in the land, who would all get together around a round table, usually with an elected high priestess in charge, and would micromanage their society, kind of like a weaponized cafe clutch. They would hear complaints against the code of honor and complaints against things that had gone wrong, people who had had affairs with the wrong people, and they would make decisions, and all the ladies would meet. They would hear the complaints. They kept statutes like a regular court, and commands to attend went out like jury service. So in some respects, it behaved like a court, and all women, and also behaves a bit like a Masonic lodge, but all rich, and all ladies of the land. And this was a tradition started by Eleanor of Aquitaine, and it went on for about 200 years. And I guess by the late 12th century, they wielded a considerable degree of hidden power in the region, and to some extent, it was that notion of feminine power in the South, which provoked the Crusade and which antagonized the patriarchal Holy Roman Church. Just even to this day, they won't have it that women can officiate as priests. But it went deeper than that. I think they certainly some of the ladies of that day, and here I'm thinking of figures like Esclamande de Foix, like Loba the she-wolf, Etienne the Penauteur, nicknamed Loba the she-wolf, who was the chatelaine of the courts of love and the patroness of a great many troubadours. So we know about her from a lot of troubadour poetry. And there's a wild rose still named after her. Loba de Pinotier. Every image of these ladies has been destroyed by 7 centuries of patriarchal tyranny and the Inquisition. So we no statues or images of these I guess pre-medieval heroines survives into our time, but we do have these oddments, poems, yeah, scraps of lore handed down to us. So
The history
yeah,
is so rich and multi-layered, and I'm very much still learning about it. So I'm very grateful to hear it from you. Um, yeah, to hear about what happened before the the Catholicism of the church had a heavy presence, shall we say. Um, it's good to hear what was happening before because the pieces that I was putting together were that, amongst the Cathars, if we are going to call them that, the women and men had equality. The women could have places of spiritual authority, and maybe the highest initiate was actually a high priestess in the end. But that was happening in the context of a very patriarchal culture at the same time. And
yeah, I think here in the South the forces were equally balanced. I wouldn't say that it was a patriarchy or a matriarchy, but for its time it was certainly yeah, it went remarkably far down that route. The great Esclamond, the high priestess who endowed Montsegur, who basically built the Grail Castle of Montsegur, being a yeah, a strong example. And certainly this threat of the matriarchy, the threat of feminine power was something terrifying to the regular Catholics. I mean, the before the Crusade, the Holy Roman Church tried to reason with the Cathars and attempted to persuade them to come back to the bosom of the Mother Church peacefully. Esclamond de Foix, the most famous of the Cathar high priestesses, confronted them at the conference of Pamia and was famously ordered to go back to her spinning by the Holy Roman prelates. Go back to your distaff, woman.
how
Who yeah, who refused to yeah to listen to Esclamond. But there's kind of a deeper level to it too, because so many of the statues of the Virgin out here are depicted holding distaffs, holding the thread. And the Cathars were also known as weavers, the tissera, and there's been a very long history of making fine textiles and weaving down here. So to some extent, I guess Esclamond de Foix did hold the threads of the kingdom in her hand, and there is a power to that. But yeah, it was only after the conference of Pamia that she realized an apocalypse was coming on the south, and came to Montsegur in the High Pyrenees, basically opened the treasuries of Foix to construct a sanctuary for people fleeing from the genocide to come, because the genocide did come. The Holy Roman Pope, Pope Innocent III, eventually called a crusade upon the south, which basically opened the doors of hell. This crusade destroyed Occitania as a nation, but also gave rise to the birth of the Inquisition, which went on for centuries and centuries, and
yeah,
devolves
well,
into the witch hunts, and it literally marked the beginning of 7 centuries of persecution, of burning women and witches all across Europe. So yeah, very much lit the taper on a genuine multi-century apocalypse. The Holy Roman Church really made their position incredibly clear. a number of times. It's worth noting that the final chatelaine of the courts of love, Gerauda de Laurac, Dame Gerauda, who was apparently a very good lady. They say that no one ever left her table hungry. Um, she was captured by the Crusaders under Simon de Montfort at the town of Laval, um, turned over to the dogs of war to be gang raped, and then her still living body was thrown down the well in the center of the town. This didn't kill her; she was still making noises. So de Montfort it's made her followers sit around the well, and they dropped rocks on her until she fell quiet. And then they killed her followers, which was officially the end of the courts of love. So yeah, the Crusaders were, I think, pretty adamant in their desire to smash and erase all trace of yeah, not only the Cathars but the social structures that had existed before that time. And this ran as deep as criminalizing vegetarianism, and literally destroying the written language. So yeah, certainly a genocide. They made it illegal to basically make love or to marry anyone who didn't speak French, which is also a fully genocidal move to breed out the original inhabitants of the land.
The original inhabitants of the land were not French.
No, they spoke Occitan. They were Occitanian, and
Yes.
Occitans are, yeah, a Romance language, from which we get this word Romance. It's close to Catalan and closer to Italian. There's maybe some English in there as well. Montsegur is literally the secure mountain, the safe place, and sometimes you can, yeah, half recognize words in it. But this language was effectively erased from existence, along with pretty much every record, every book, and yeah, every manuscript in a sort of 7 centuries tabula rasa, to try to stop any of this coming down to us. We know mostly about this period from Inquisition records and from the records made by the Crusaders, history being recorded by the victors. But
Yeah.
the Inquisition were like the Nazis, very thorough bureaucrats, and took depositions, took witness statements. So there remains a vast amount of first-hand testimony from these times, which yeah, does give us a partial view of what happened.
Yes, it's incredible that so much of those documents are still around to be read. And I know that you've read a lot of them, given the where you are and the path you're on and the book you've written. But just coming back to the romance and the Cathars and the pre-Cathars, the pre-church influence in the area. So it was seen as liberation, as a way for people to have more autonomy from the strategic alliances that were happening in terms of marriage.
Yeah, I was at pains to introduce this notion of the courts of love because I didn't want you to feel that just because all the marriages were arranged, that was necessarily arranged by the patriarchy. Because, like in Dune with the Bene Gesserit trying to breed Paul Atreides, it was really also the ladies who were micromanaging that aspect of society, who was going to breed with who and who was going to marry who. And that kind of worked for a quite a long period of time. It was kind of a working model, and often folk falling in love and having affairs outside of the plan upset them. I mean, particularly amongst the aristocracy, it was that was a huge no-no, and scandalous behaviour. And a great many of the folk, of course, didn't love their partners. A lot of the time, they didn't live even in the same town or the same castle. In some cases, as we know, they didn't even live in the same country. So it was a tricky thing, and a lot of times as well, it didn't compensate for people's sexual preferences. I mean, there's an awful lot of gay kings who are forced to procreate totally against their will. But the upshot of that was everyone was allowed to keep their own entourage amongst the aristocracy. The pretty much all of the lords of this region at that time had concubines, had their girlfriends. And pretty much all the ladies surrounded themselves with their favorite knights and their favorite troubadours. So they all had their partners or their actual lovers, and having an affair with a troubadour or a knight or with your concubine wasn't deemed a problem. It was a problem if you were going to have an affair with another aristocrat, and the lady of the other castle. That messed with the social structure, such as when Roger Ramon of Foix fell in love with Loba of Cabaret. This was a problem. And, if Roger Ramon was having it off with his Saracen slave, no one cared. So it was a funny world, but I think most of the aristocrats probably had their loved ones with them in the form of troubadours, knights, or constant companions. But for the sake of the way that society worked, they had to officially breed only with the people with their stipulated partner. Although how many of the kids were legitimate, that's another part of the story, especially considering just how many of the different kings of France were gay to begin with.
For sure. It's such an interesting terrain to look into, and serving the social order, women can definitely be the hand of patriarchy, a lot of the time in that as well. Um, but yes, coming to Mary Magdalene and the connection that you've become aware of. I mean, you would see so many people coming on pilgrimage because you live at, well, not at the castle, but very close, I believe, at Montsegur.
Yeah, I relocated to this area in 2008 after getting to know it well enough that finally my life in the outside world started to seem unimportant, and it made more sense to be as close as possible to the castle and to try to keep a close eye on what was happening out here. And I guess you refer to the fact that we get about between 100 and 150,000 people visiting the castle of Montsegur every year. So we get a lot of pilgrims in, and given the nature of Holy Grail and the Catharism itself, the Grail being something that has the promise of making you whole again, of healing you or filling the emptiness inside you. It means that effectively we get an awful lot of damaged people, a lot of folk who are broken by life, who are looking for something. Because I don't believe that you even go looking for a grail until you've been hurt and until you feel the need to be healed. It's not something that normal people do in a way, but to actually set out on a spiritual quest of that nature. So people come here hoping to find something, a balm or a way of being whole again, of finding what was lost. Maybe that's one's inner child or one's whatever it is that's been taken from one. I certainly get all kinds here from bereaved parents through to Vietnam vets. The
Oh,
strangest people come to Montsegur. A great many people believe that they are reincarnated Cathars, which is a funny thing because if you're here full time, you notice that mostly you get the people believing that they are relatively important people from history. So we get two or three Raymond de Prey, who was the Lord of Montsegur, who get two or three of them a year. Esclamont's also very popular as is
oh,
Marianne for people's targeting it with their past life memories. But there's so many of them, and I mean, literally 150,000 a year. Montsegur was also the site of the largest mass burning of heretics, witches, and heretics in European history. But
oh wow.
yeah, at the end of the 10-month siege of Montsegur, the defenders of the castle and the Cathars sheltering within its walls were given the option of either recanting and renouncing their faith, which and being allowed to live, or being burned alive on the Camp de Cremat. And famously, between 260 and 300 people, close to all of the defenders and many of the people who had fought alongside them, chose to stand by the faith and died at the stake here in March 16th, 1244.
Wow. Wow. I didn't realize it was the place where that happened the most. That's incredible. And the dreaming of Montsegur sounds so alive. This is not past history. From how you describe it, it's incredibly alive. It's a portal, it's a living presence in the area. I think I heard you say on a different interview that you did that you can't go to the local shop without someone talking about the 1200s.
Yeah, that's you hear people still arguing about what happened all the time. The shadow of that period hangs very heavy. It's strange because a lot of other history has happened since. We've had the wars of religion, we've had the Napoleonic Wars, etc. But here in the South, it does seem to cycle back to early 13th century and 1244 over and over again. And like I said, between 250, 260, and 300 people died that day on March 16th. Yet thousands of people remember being burned at the stake and think that they were burned there, which is a curious thing because certainly far more people um, have past life memories of it than the number of people who actually historically perished here.
I
So it's an oddity, but it's sincere. Whenever in summer times, sometimes I take two or three groups up the mountain a day, and with each group, you can see when you get to the top of the mountain, some people will sit down and start crying, and it will hit them very deeply, or they will feel that they were there before. It's a very commonly felt perception. And I suspect that there's a reason for it. I don't think it's quite what we think it is. Maybe it's in
yeah,
some way the morphogenetic field
yeah.
of the 13th century is so strong that it starts to impose itself, or those memories start to replay themselves using our own nervous systems as wetware or something. But it's a dream that consistently returns. And even if it doesn't affect one instantly and directly, you'll find within a few days people will want to start buying medieval dresses. Men will suddenly start thinking, well, maybe I should get a sword. These funny ideas start, medieval ideas start slipping into people's heads.
It's so
I think it,
I wonder if it's more someone can feel connected to the soul group of these people without necessarily have been one of them. But yeah, it
that's what
sounds
I
like
suspect.
yeah, the enchantment and the way that it lures people in is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's certainly the case, and it lures people from across the world in funny ways. People start dreaming about Esclamon, dreaming about the White Lady, or yeah, have experiences on literally on the far side of the world in California or Australia, and feel compelled to come to Montsegur, which I think has been sort of sending out some kind of metaphysical stress signal for 7 centuries. It's like a beacon or something
Yeah.
that people can yeah hear in their dreams. And given the Cathar belief that life is an illusion, an illusory veil, um, I will say as well that Montsegur actually has the potential to become more real than what we assumed was reality. it can actually capsize to the point where that world, the world of 1244, becomes the reality, and our world starts to seem like the illusion. Becomes flimsy and insubstantial, which my career in the outside world would fade away into something like a weird dream, whereas nice Glamonda and the need to save the castle would suddenly seem like the actual reality. It's super odd. It happens in other places too.
Yes.
Um, I know, I know in Jerusalem they're prone to there's something called Jerusalem syndrome that affects the tourists. That it's to such an extent that there's actually a wing of the hospital in Jerusalem devoted to people who basically whose lives are capsized by the emotions that they experience. And this usually happens in the same pattern. They do a pilgrimage to the Holy Lands. They one of the first symptoms is you start to feel a very strong identification with a particular biblical figure, like maybe the prophet Gideon or one of the disciples or Mary M. You then feel a compulsion to visit all of the sites connected to that character to make pilgrimage, to do prostrations, and then you start wanting to dress like them. And normally it doesn't become an issue until you feel the need to clear the money changers out of the temple, stand up on the altar in the church in Bethlehem and preach the true Christianity. And at some point, it becomes a public order issue, at which point they get arrested. They have a special wing at the hospital in Jerusalem for dealing with people having what they dub Jerusalem syndrome. And they feel the best way to deal with it is literally to send people home, and that normally when they're back in their home environment, rapidly they go back to their normal selves. But it is that thing of the power of the original story becoming so strong that one's personality can crumble in the face of it and be overwhelmed with the other reality, with the other world that's going on.
Yes, yes. Portals often have that crossing of timelines where you can just kind of get swallowed into one, and your individual identity is maybe a little consumed by that frequency. It's
Yeah, it's somehow stronger than life, which is a funny thing. I felt if I were to see the face of the White Lady too clearly, I would cease to exist. It's whatever that force is to me feels more powerful than the material world. And
Please tell us about the White Lady. And I mean, I know you've had a very sacred experience, and it's often, best not to share all the details, but if you could say anything about the feeling or the significance or the energy of this so we can understand more.
well, I don't think she minds, so that's the main thing. For a long time, I thought that a lot of people believe that if you talk about these things, it'll never happen for you again, and you won't be allowed to see those things again. That they're too sacred to verbalize. But I did have a very strong encounter in back in September on the September moon, so which I found reassuring because it made me realize that it didn't matter. It was okay to talk about it.
So it's
Um,
happened a time. It's not just one time.
no, it's been an evolving relationship, which I'm super grateful for, and that's the main reason I'm here because I've got no substitute for that. And so long as there's still that possibility for a true gnosis, for a direct one-on-one encounter with one's deity. It's going to keep me close to the mountain. I've got there's nothing else compares. I mean, it's like I feel I count myself lucky to have found some kind of meaning, at least one that works for me and ticks all the boxes. And, it certainly was something I was looking for a long time. So Who is the White Lady?
If you are a woman, I want you to know about the work I do when not speaking on this podcast, which is all about how to live from your embodied womanly presence for your health on all levels, as well as it being a feminine spiritual path in itself. And it has a way of effortlessly unlocking your unique gifts to be a voice for women in the way that you are called to do so. And this happens through a facilitated training called Women's Somatic Sovereignty Certification. It gives you the chance to restore your own female nervous system, which I specialize in, while gaining the skills to be an effective somatic professional supporting women to thrive. Come to one of my free workshops to know more about this. We have a fantastic community of women to learn and to grow with, which has been going strong since 2005. So see the links below this episode for more on certification training.
So where I am it's in the now the French Pyrenees. The Pyrenees are a bunch of mountains which, yeah, pushed up in ancient times from, yeah, two tectonic plates grinding together. And ever since the last ice age, somewhere around then, we've had human beings here. It's been continuously inhabited for a long, long time. There were Neanderthals before, and they found stone rings so deeply embedded in the limestone that they predate human beings. So we have to assume that ritual worship was going on even in yeah, pre-hominid times. But
Wow.
from the very, very, yeah, early human days, we've got some of the earliest examples of human art in the caves of the Ariège and the Ardèche, in Lascaux, Troy Frere, and yeah, the Chauvet cave. And yeah, among these things are a great many relics, including the earliest representations of the human face. And these relics, such as the one that I'm wearing a replica of around my neck, which is a white lady, a with braided hair. They're almost all ladies, these goddesses. Um, the fertility goddesses of the Pyrenees. The one I'm wearing is a lady called the Dame de Bressemboi, or the Lady of the Hat, the Dame de
Wow.
Capuche. And she's made originally it was made of a horse's tooth. That, yeah, was somewhere around the time of the last ice age, so
Incredible.
long before, yeah, long before written records. So there was a goddess here for a very, very long time. The White Lady of the Pyrenees, the Deus Mare, the Mother Goddess, the Magna Mater, goes back to way before recorded history. So there was, yeah, a super ancient tradition that's maybe going on for 25,000 years, since long before we had words to describe it or explain it.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm so moved to know that this was there in France. I mean, I'm aware of the Paleolithic goddess tradition times in other parts of the world, but I hadn't heard specifically for this location, this land in France that you're on. So the White Lady connection extends way back to then.
Yeah, I think she's always been here. I think there's always been a maternal force, which is the true sovereignty of the land,
Mm,
the true sovereignty that begats kingship. I mean, in the original run of things, it was divine monarchy from the point of view that Arthur had to be chosen. It was given the Excalibur by the Lady of the Lake,
yeah.
the arm clad in white samite that chooses the king. The monarchy are meant to be chosen by the gods in the yeah, in this notion of divine monarchy.
Mm,
That was the original deal. The true sovereignty was not the monarch, but the thing that begat sovereignty, where yeah, the lady herself. And I think she's worn any number of faces over the years because yeah, down through the ages, we've had all kinds of different goddesses. The time elapsed since the last ice age, yeah, is lengthy, and there's been, yeah, folk from I've got a particular soft spot for Belisama, Summer Bright, Belisina, the shining one, the beautiful one, who is the moon goddess from Ibero-Celtic times, and the moon goddess of the Gauls, the moon being the bride of the sun. And yeah, I do kind of love Belisama. But among others, you've got Minerva, always represented with her breastplate, a spear or sword or shield, and her wings always defending the south. In Roman times, the most popular goddess amongst the legionnaires was Epona, the wild horse lady, the horse goddess, who was for a long while was the most popular lady deity. And I would go so far as to suggest that the symbolic figure of the bare-breasted lady leading the men to the barricades in the image of the French Revolution is another version of this figure. When the Bastille was torn down, they erected a statue of the goddess at the site. And I would go so far as to suggest also that France's gift to America, the Statue of Liberty, represents that same force. And
Yeah,
is she has always been the guardian of freedom, the guardian of liberty. And this white lady underneath so many different masks and names as the protective guardian mother, I think has been an aspect of this right from the very, very beginning. And I think
absolutely.
Mary M fits into that schema of things
Yes,
because Mary M arrives actually very late in the story from the point of view that that's only 2,000 years ago. It's out of, yeah, maybe 25,000 or 17,000 years of history. By the time Mary M got here, she would have found the South was already prepared by yeah, centuries of goddess worship, where the proto-Christians practiced their baptismal rites. Previously, the doves of Aphrodite had fed from the hands of Vestal virgins. There's always been something going on here. Hmm.
amazing, amazing. I I want to talk to you about so many things, the White Lady, the Grail. But if I'm just to pause for a moment with, I see the Grail story, Lady of the Lake, King Arthur, Knights Templar, this this incredible history. Well, firstly, is there historical evidence for Lady of the Lake and King Arthur? I know people know this is a myth, but I'm curious what you know, what you have found.
Well, I'm not really the guy to ask about King Arthur because I didn't go after Arthur. I have been to Tintagel, and I do believe Arthur was born in Tintagel, and I like to believe that Merlin is still in a stone someplace and never died, and that Arthur is in Avalon, the once and future king. I do like to believe that, and I find it easier to believe since coming to believe in the White Lady from the point of view that if she exists, then maybe Merlin can still be in that rock because I certainly didn't expect her to exist. It was
Mm,
something that I'd only heard about in myths and in romantic tales, and until I actually saw the
yeah.
apparition with my own waking eyes, and then also realized that other people could see it too. Yeah, I'd assumed all the stuff to be yeah, the fairy tales, or I've made the mistake many people make, which is to assume that mythology was something that existed long ago in classical times and isn't still a force in our present era.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel that this, I've always loved this story, but the relevance of it for now, orientating to modern culture and how it seems like a guiding light. It seems like a bit of a compass for restoration between man and woman. And I'm a little surprised how many people I know don't really understand this story, don't even know what the Grail is and what it represents. Some people do. Um, And another curiosity that I have around that, the Knights Templar were actually serving the Pope, the Catholic Church. They were Catholic, which was not exactly in favor of female autonomy and yeah, so I'm curious about that overlap and how that all works.
Well, I hope you've got some time, because that's a, a complicated business. Um, Okay, so yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Templars myself.
Mhm.
From the point of view that had I been back in that point in time, I would not have joined them. Only that it's
Yes.
it's a warrior knight order loyal to the Pope, who were founded at the time of the First Crusade, and founded in Jerusalem on Temple Mount, from which they get their name. And yeah, you had to be celibate, you had to be male, and you had to give all of your money to the order, be prepared to die for it. And I don't, I wouldn't want to basically do any of those things. So yeah, I've never felt particularly drawn to the Templars as such. I mean, a bunch of sword wielding incels who are loyal to yeah loyal to the papacy. They're not the
Yes.
same as our Cathars, who are a completely different folk, who are basically something similar to medieval hippies, I guess, from the point of view that Cathars were vegetarians and pacifists, devout
Yeah.
pacifists who didn't believe in killing other living things, not which includes animals,
Yeah.
warm-blooded creatures. And I think, given our knowledge of present-day biology, that would include cold-blooded creatures too. And at that time, they were medieval times. They were still debating whether or not whales and dolphins were fish or mammals at the point when their faith was wiped out in terms of what you could legitimately eat and what had a soul and what didn't.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah,
It's interesting to hear that. So you don't identify with the Templars, and I know that there is a bit of a resurgence of men that see that as a salvation, with this rhetoric of let's make patriarchy great again. And I I get that there's good intention, but I think what these men are not understanding is that the actual definition of patriarchy and what it implies is not exactly a trajectory that leads to union with woman in her wholeness. It's it's not what they think. And so when I hear people speaking these narratives, I think it's really important to understand history and where things have come from. I mean, I've seen artwork, imagery that shows the Templars behind the lady as though they are fully supporting her, whereas where that may have been the case in a way that wasn't directly what they were about. They were serving the Pope, right? They were
yeah,
serving.
they were, but the thing of it was is that way back at the time of the First Crusade, they excavated Temple Mount. And they found something under Temple Mount at the time of the First Crusades. They were effectively searching for the remains of the Temple of Solomon. They believed that the Temple of Solomon was on Temple Mount. They hoped to, I guess, retrieve the treasures of the Temple of Solomon. But when they excavated the mount, they found something. And what they found, I guess, shattered a lot of their preconceptions about Christianity. He planted the seed of heresy within the Templar Order. They knew things about the roots of Christianity, which didn't match the story they'd been given by the Holy Roman Church. I mean, I think the probably the most shocking thing that they would have come across, and I do know what's under Temple Mount, and have a considerable amount of data on it from the Israeli Antiquities Board and from rail archaeology. And the Templar excavations certainly existed, and they certainly did find stuff. But I think, yeah, chief amongst those
Superficial.
things,
Yeah.
the most shocking thought would have been the discovery that God was a woman. That would have, already been something difficult for them to process at the time of the yeah, the first crusade. And the Templars largely sat out the extermination of the Cathars. They were pretty much impartial and stayed on the fence. And although I suspect that they erred towards the side of the Crusaders and towards the side of the papacy, because when the Templar Order itself was eradicated about 100 years later, a generation or so later, when the Templars were themselves accused of heresy, and famously on Friday the 13th, and mass arrested and then exterminated, and the leader of its order, Jacques de Molay, was famously slow roasted by the King of France on the on the Ile-de-France in Paris. Um,
Oh.
yeah, when that happened, the plot to overthrow the Templars and nationalize their assets, because the Templars, by the way, invented banking. They invented the checkbook. And through this invention of banking, and they became fantastically rich. The one of richer than France and richer than the papacy, which was one of the reasons they brought them down. But the master plan to, nationalize their assets and kill all of them, eradicate the order, was hatched not by the king, Philip le Bel, but by his lawyer. The king's lawyer
Uh,
was the mastermind behind it. And the king's lawyer is a fabulous figure, Guillaume de Nogaret, because Guillaume de Nogaret came from St. Felix de Caraman down here in the south, and his family had suffered badly in the Albigensian Crusade and had been accused of being heretics and had lost their lands. And he had a huge chip on his shoulder against the Pope, and went about it getting his revenge very thoroughly. This man actually succeeded in impeaching the Pope, which he managed to have the Pope removed from power, which was an extraordinary business. He charged the Pope was charged with 48 different charges, including having sexual relations with a demon that he kept in his ring. And so Go de Nogaret, and he's also the same guy who basically hatched the master plan to destroy the Templar movement. One of history's great villains, of course, but at the same time, it's undeniable that he had Cathar roots, and was also motivated by by the Albigensian Crusade, which again shows that the Cathars and the Templars weren't really friends. They both were accused of being heretics, and both were burned and destroyed, but they weren't really singing quite from the same hymn sheet.
yeah.
And so,
And I really want for men of today to have that, healthy, noble example to look to. I just wonder if this is maybe a interesting, distorted choice if they're the ones that are being honed in on.
to bring it around. One of the problems with this thing is that is this thing they call the Grail,
Yeah.
because you say that you're surprised that people don't really know what it is, but
Yes.
it's not surprising, because really impossible to actually physically define what the Grail was supposed to be. It's so protean. I mean, the actual word Grail and the point it enters our records is through the account written of Parsifal, written by Chrétien de Troyes, which initially describes the Grail as a great golden dish with a Christian fish symbol on it that's brought into the hall.
Oh.
And this dish is actually a genuine relic, still exists, and is in the collection of the Louvre Museum in Paris. So,
Wow.
and Chrétien de Troyes in the first account says that's the Grail. So it's changed a few times. And then Wolfram von Eschenbach wrote the next Parsifal, which came at the end of the 12th century. He felt that Wolfram says that Chrétien has done wrong by the story of the Grail, sets out to try and get it right. And Wolfram's account drags the Templars into the story. As you say, the notion of the Templars guarding the Grail or guarding the Lady of the Grail. Wolfram's account grafts the Templars onto the myth, and I've actually got Wolfram's account right here, so I will share it with you. Going to the direct words from the late 12th century, Wolfram says, "It is well known to me that many fighting men dwell at Montsegur with the Grail. They are continually riding out on sorties in quest of adventure. Whether these same Templars reap trouble or renown, they bear it for their sins. A warlike company lives there. I will tell you how they are nourished. They live from a stone whose essence is most pure. If you have never heard of it, I shall name it for you here. It is called lapsit exilus. By virtue of the stone, the phoenix is burned to ashes, in which it is reborn. Thus does the phoenix molt its feathers, which done it shines dazzlingly bright and lovely as before. Further, however ill a mortal may be, from the day on which he sees the stone, he cannot die for that week, nor does he lose his colour. For if anyone, maid or man, were to look upon the Graal for 200 years, you would have to admit their colour would be as fresh as in their early prime, except their hair would be grey. Such powers does the stone confer on mortal men, that their flesh and bones are soon made young again. The stone is also called the Graal. So yeah, go Wolfram. So Wolfram's Graal is a stone. Yeah, utterly unlike the grisal or serving dish in Chrétien's account. And then it took about 100 years later for Robert de Boron to decide it was the cup of Christ, at which point it then became analogous with the cup of the Last Supper, and which is kind of a normal Holy Roman Church way to roll of appropriating mythological things and making them into relics of the church. But at the same time, we can see that the chalice was already a thing before was ever around, from the point of view that Abraham is already celebrating Passover in the Old Testament with the chalice. And there's already the cup of Abraham, just like there's already a baptismal tradition with John the Baptist going on, before Christ comes. So some kind of proto-Christian tradition would have involved both the cup and the baptismal rite. And it's
Mm.
something more ancient than language again.
Yes, yes. I mean, the claims with the Grail is that it's from the Last Supper that Yeshua drank from. But I've heard otherwise, and you're telling us now that it predates well before Yeshua's time. And but let's go back to the Temple Mount actually, because we can't skip over that very important discovery, that treasure. What they excavated was not in alignment with their narrative of what they thought or what they hoped would verify the validity of their lineage, of their religion, of whatever they're about in their esoteric order. What they found was, maybe you can tell us.
Well, I could tell you, but I do so at the risk of saying things that maybe I wouldn't. Yeah, I will tell you, but the thing of it is that the excavations certainly existed, but they believed they had found the Temple of Solomon underneath Temple Mount, and a great many people in the present day still have a vested interest in that myth. But despite the agreement made between Mushi Dayan and the Palestinians in the 1970s that no one would dig underneath Al-Aqsa Mosque, all kinds of people have been digging underneath Al-Aqsa Mosque and have been doing so in secret ever since the 1970s. And people now have a pretty good idea of what's actually underneath the mosque and what's actually underneath Temple Mount. And I believe that there's two previous temples underneath the present day mosque. And the Templar excavations basically breached into a Roman era temple, an octagonal temple, which, in my mind, in my opinion, has little or nothing to do with the Temple of Solomon or Judaism as we know it. I also believe that the what we think of as the Wailing Wall, what's meant to be the outermost wall of the Temple of Solomon, I believe is part of the Roman era construction. And an octagonal temple with a Roman era goddess is something also that's much more likely to have had a cup involved in it, because in Roman times the grape and the harvest were sacred. The cup which holds the wine, decorated with maybe grape leaves, and the vine is yeah, a symbol of the harvest and the goddess and of Bacchus. And further down below the Roman era stonework and the Roman era layer of Temple Mount, which is what's immediately underneath the mosque, is a septagonal construction, which I believe dates back to the time of the Canaanites. And the Canaanites had a habit of building pentagonal temples on mountaintops because that's where they worshipped their goddess, who was a lady named Asherah. And I believe that when the children of Israel first arrived there, the Canaanites, whom Yahweh Jehovah instructed them to exterminate with such vigor, were already worshipping Asherah, their goddess, on the site where that we now know of as Temple Mount, where present-day Al-Aqsa Mosque stands. And I suspect that the rabbis and the people of Israel decided not to build the Temple of Solomon there because I think they felt it was unclean. It was the site of the Canaanite temple. I suspect they're much more likely, if there is such a thing as the Temple of Solomon, to have constructed this maybe underneath Mount Moriah. But I'm not of the belief that the Temple of Solomon was actually ever on Temple Mount, which is an extremely heretical point of view and probably enough to get me killed because there's all kinds of people out there who would, for all kinds of reasons, would like to prove ancient Jewish usage of Temple Mount. So therefore, there's a huge pressure to authenticate relics as being relics of the Temple of Solomon. Even though, to my opinion, and this is, I do have a fair amount of records, including scans, basically ultrasound and ground penetrating radar material that would tend to indicate that this is not the case, that the Templars found for sure a temple. They found the relics of a goddess, but I don't believe that it actually was what they thought it was. So I think that in Parsifal, the central Grail myth, Parsifal initially fails in his quest to attain the Grail because he fails to ask the right question. And a big part of the message of Parsifal is that a real hero has to always ask questions. And one of the key questions of the Grail is what has always been whom does the Grail serve? Whose
Yeah,
cup is it anyway? And I'm of the opinion that it's her cup,
yeah.
that it always belonged to the goddess right from the very beginning, and that it was the goddess who was worshipped on Temple Mount right at the very beginning. And it
Well,
was the same goddess who was worshipped on the top of Montsegur and on top of many of the high mountains in this land. And I think it was, her cup. And all these other patriarchal forces have been falling over each other to try and control it. Beyond that, I also think that the three main monotheistic patriarchal religions, conservative Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, are behaving shamefully in our present era and are dragging our world to ruin. It's the fact that all of these patriarchies are fighting it out over something which I don't in my heart honestly believe belongs to any of them is yeah a disgrace.
Yeah.
It's
Yes, yes. The amount of suffering that this has created is beyond belief. And yeah, how how fascinating. God was a woman.
it, yeah, well, well, certainly one of them was. I mean, part of the the problem is that if you've got one god, then it sort of opens the door to the idea that there might be more. And yeah, it seems to me that there's always been a patriarchal and a matriarchal force at work here, and
Sure.
there's duo sunt. There are two, just like the sun and the moon, and a situation um like Montsegur, the siege of Montsegur, the 10-month battle, is so clearly a confrontation between aggressive patriarchy,
Yeah,
the forces of the king and the pope dragging their phallic battering rams up the mountain to the castle of Esclamont before the high priestess, the guardian of the Grail. That yeah, it seems to polarize into Montsegur has this habit, I think it's the energy or something of polarizing reality, so that things that are normally harder to spot somehow become separated out. You can maybe see good and evil, yeah, more clearly. But
I believe
the
that.
one thing you definitely come away with is a sense that there's more than one force, and there's a force of love and there's a force of light, but there's
Mm.
also a force that opposes it.
Mm.
The two constantly seem to be yeah, butting heads. I don't know what that is. It's or why that is. Just like I don't know why we're here, whether we're here willingly or whether we're condemned to this life or whether we chose it. And I don't know whether the matriarchal force, the goddess, and the patriarchal god are fighting a war between each other that's been going on for centuries, or whether they're just playing a game, or whether they're amusing each other by playing a multi-generational game of risk with our lives, by deciding who sides with whom. It's very odd. I wish they could sort it out. If it's a some kind of metaphysical marital spat that's been going on for it does feel that way sometimes.
That's very funny and possibly extremely true. Um, I'm personally of the belief that, I mean, we have a lot of goddess mythology, anthropology, archaeology pointing to the fact that the earliest depictions of the divine were female, the female bodies specifically. Um, I'm personally of the belief that how could the ultimate creator possibly be gendered? Because, beyond human, this doesn't even make sense. So, of course, there is equality in how I see it in the different powers of the masculine and feminine. And the inversion is that they're in conflict. The inversion is that they're constantly in war inside of us, in our lives, and at these higher levels of reality as well. And the Grail seems to have this significance, this symbolism of a possibility of a faith, a hope that we can have in some restoration of this.
Yeah, a reconciliation. I mean, the literal marriage of the sun and the moon, the possibility of peace breaking out, of balance finally happening. I think the that's got to be the base yeah, definition of the Grail. The hope that somehow this war will end, that finally a balance might be reached between light and dark, between night and day, between sun and moon, male and female. It's the harmonization of opposites,
Yeah,
which I guess is kind of a technical impossibility, like trying to harmonize two different currents of magnetic currents, but the Grail represents the possibility that it can be achieved.
Yes, yes, but electromagnetic energy is the ultimate attraction dynamic or force as well at the same time, isn't it? Um, yes. So I want to ask you this drive to keep the feminine suppressed, to keep more ancient history unknown. Who does it serve? What does it serve for that to be going on?
Um, well, I guess it's always been two forces bearing down on it simultaneously, kind of allied to each other. I mean, it certainly there's still a patriarchal conservative religious force, which we see manifested in yeah, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam,
Yeah.
which is still sadly utterly determined to enforce this ludicrous notion that man alone is made in God's image.
Yeah.
Possibly the most damaging words in the Torah or in the Bible that also excludes all animals and all other life forms, which is yeah setting up this notion of yeah the of man alone being supreme in the universe. And there's unfortunately three big monotheisms that are pretty uncool about that. We do kind of brutally enforce it. I mean, being a woman in Afghanistan is not easy, and yeah, there's that. There's the religious aspect, the three conservative patriarchal yeah peoples of the book, and I don't want to be I want to be an equal opportunities offender because I think all three tranches are equally guilty. Uh,
I agree.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, and then kind of the other force which is vested against Montsegur and vested against the Grail and the power that I've yeah one might term the White Lady is atheism, socialist atheism, and basically the stubborn desire to prove that the supernatural really doesn't exist. And we see a resistance to occult history, to magical history and supernatural history throughout academia, throughout our schools, libraries, and throughout the system. And there's a determined force within our society to consistently try to erase those inconvenient narratives and to erase inconvenient data that doesn't fit with the current scientific theories or the current academic theory as to what happened in our history. So there's a huge amount of inconvenient history that just doesn't fit the existing paradigm, which tends to get ignored and rubbed out. It's not folk coming from a particular religious standpoint, but at the same time, history is written by the victors. And as a result, any number of bizarre twists in the story have been kind of smoothed out or airbrushed over. I mean, here I think of, for instance, the number of folk in America who think that America was founded by the Puritans who came over in the Mayflower and got given turkeys by the Indians. It did not happen that way. Um, yeah, there were previous attempts to colonize America. And, by the time the Puritans arrived, there was already a European settlement on the East Coast at a place called Merrymount, which was being run by a lawyer from the West Country, from Plymouth, a man named Thomas Morton, who had erected a maypole in the center of Merrymount. There was no priest, so he'd made himself the shaman, He'd married most of his men to the Native Americans and made peace with them because he believed the only way that they could actually colonize the country was by working closely with the Indians. And had imported his pagan faith from here from the West Country. The Puritans had, as Miles Standish led the raid on Merrymount and had to cut down the maypole and drag the shaman away in chains before basically bringing Puritan rule to the East Coast colonies. Morton managed to escape, made it back to England, and sued the Puritans. Managed to revoke their charter, but these kind of little bits of occult history are inconvenient and are kind of airbrushed out. The fact that some that folk back at the time were saying, "Hey, hang on, you can't have indentured labor, you can't found a country on that, and you also can't go to war with the Indians." We history being written by the victors, we tend to erase those things, just like the notion that the Holy Roman Church hijacked Christianity completely, um, uh, edited the Bible, and rewrote the entire narrative, which and fairly recently, 700 years ago, Christ was 2,000 years ago, but we all these events happened, not even 1,000 years ago, and effectively, over 1,000 years after the death of Christ, decided what Christianity should be, and erased all the inconvenient pieces, like reincarnation, like the notion that animals have souls, little bits of the story that got erased, and that the proto-Christianity and the early faith was substantially different from the way we define it today.
Yes, gosh. And there is an attempt to erase history where you are living. And it might be a good point to mention that there is a petition to sign to support, uh, how would you describe it? Not erasing the Cathar history, basically, at this location, at this very important, powerful portal. Please know that whether you are a man or a woman or a couple listening in to this podcast, you are welcome to get in touch about private mentoring, where I can personally support you to unlearn patriarchal sex, to establish yourselves together in the beyond, which is the most natural yet evolutionary way of exploring intimacy together, increasing the pleasure, the love, the fulfillment that you get to have as man and woman. Whether you're beginning this journey or whether you're already quite advanced, you're welcome to talk with me on a free connection call to see whether a confidential, private mentoring process is right for you. You can find the connection call links in the show notes.
Yeah, the forces of darkness have always laid siege to the Grail, and since time immemorial, they've sought to erase the Cathars, completely erase them. I mean, that's why they came up with the idea of mass burning them originally and destroying all the documents. And also separating them from everyone else, like it was a virus, so that anyone who had contact with them would be destroyed,
Wow.
to try to completely wipe it out from existence. And this continues down to the present day. And the way it's gone is over the last 5 years or so. This really broke out around 2021, which was the 700th anniversary of the burning of the last Cathar. There's an apocryphal regional prophecy that after 7 centuries, the laurel will turn green again, that the old ways will return, which technically would have fallen due in 2021. And it seems that some organized high up force out there, which I assume is connected to conservative Christianity, and may be connected to Opus Dei. It's certainly, I would suspect, coming from conservative Catholicism, um, has worked very hard to stop this from happening. And one of the ways they've done that is by attacking most of the historians and scholars who have written about the Cathars and basically systematically discrediting a lot of the academics who have written on this material, and so, also folk have been writing papers increasingly on the notion that the Cathars didn't exist, which comes from the Bayside idea that they didn't call themselves or identify as such. And I believe that the amount of academic papers now arguing that the Cathars never existed has started to reach tipping point. And UNESCO in our present day has announced that they will not recognize Montsegur or the so-called Cathar castles unless all reference to the C word, to the Cathar word, is removed from the signage, along with references to what happened before the coming of the French and the coming of the Christians. So the move is they want to rebrand Montsegur as a French royal castle. And this is not just Montsegur; it's all of the regional castles. This covers Pullerong, Perpetues, Keribus, and yeah, basically all of the constructions from that era. To they want to rebrand Montsegur as a effectively a 14th century French military garrison constructed to guard the border with Spain. This also serves France by saying that that the French built it. This has been set up for a while by folk filing papers on the notion that the castle on top of the mountain in the present day was heavily rebuilt in the 14th century. And you will see even on present day signage claims saying that the castle as it exists now has nothing in common with the castle that came before. But again, this is not true.
Mm.
Again, we can see that the construction of the mountain was made out of the stones that were there before. It's changed shape a little, but it's still made out of the same stones. The village, the terraces and the constructions on the east face of the mountain are definitely from this period of the 11th or 12th century. So effectively using a combination of cancel culture and
Yes.
gradually building up an academically credible argument against it all. There's now a move to a kind of airbrush this bit of history out of existence. So we're circulating a petition to try and stop that, which has thus far reached 5,000 names, which I think is enough for them to hear it. The um the same thing is apparently going on in Glastonbury, where UNESCO are
Oh.
refusing to recognize Glastonbury Abbey as a World Heritage Site, unless they remove references to Arthur, Guinevere, and the Glastonbury Cross and the
Oh
Holy
my
Grail.
God.
They don't like the woo woo weird stuff that's crept in there. If we could define it strictly as a ruined abbey from the medieval period, that will satisfy UNESCO. But to say it's the resting place of Arthur and Guinevere is something that UNESCO can't support. Just like Montsegur being the Grail Castle, it's a step too far for them. I think that's kind of motivated on some level by academic pedantry and a natural kind of resistance towards magical and
Yeah.
mythological history. But it's also clearly being helped along by conservative Christianity, who think, okay, good, now's our chance just to close the book on the Cathars.
Well,
Um,
they're a little late. Seems they're a little late. Like the cat's been out of the bag for some time. These stories are, feel like they're in the bones of people and the place, the living intelligence of the actual locations holding these memories. Um, Yeah, it's it feels
Yeah, it's bizarre.
important. Yeah,
I
like the
mean,
history of Europe is important for us to know and to remember.
yeah, no, my book partially concerns the life and death of the German Jewish Grail historian Otto Rahn. And Otto did say that whoever seeks to know themselves should seek to penetrate the history of their nation at every turn, which is, yeah, one of his bits of advice. And so it is.
Mm.
And yeah, living in Montsegur, for 10 years, I've been a pain in the ass on the village council. I've attempted to exercise my right to have some say in the destiny of the castle. And over the course of this time, I've seen so much pedantry and backpedaling and foolishness in terms of the official documentation and the official signage, the official archaeology.
Well,
At the moment, even for UNESCO putting its oar in, it's already in a terrible place. I mean, the signs on the mountain are already bonkers. I mean, the first sign you get on the mountain has the seven-headed beast from the Book of Revelations on it, shown rising against Christianity, just to remind us. I mean, the Crusaders did refer to it as Montsegur as the synagogue of Satan, and the dragon's head or the serpent's head. The signage kind of reminds us of that. And there's a sign halfway up the mountain, which um, kind of says it all. It's in about five different languages, so it's only one paragraph which has been translated really badly into about five languages. It simply says it's got really bad syntax. It says Catharism is again discussed in 1875 by Baptist pastor Napoleon Perrat. His book, Histoire de Albigeois, lends the mountain a mystical aspect. Holy Grail, Order of the Solar Temple. Um, and then it says, whereas films and television popularized the story of Montsegur in the 20th century, modern archaeology paints a more realistic picture. Full stop. It doesn't tell you what the more realistic picture is. The claim films and television popularized the story of Montsegur in the 20th century is an outright lie because there are no movies about Montsegur. The story's never
right.
been told. It's never been dramatized. So why is there a sign on the mountain nailed to a railway sleeper saying that film and television has popularized the story, but it's not realistic? The first part tries to convince you that the whole idea was cooked up by Baptist pastor Napoleon Perrat in 1875 in his book Histoire de Albigeois. But beyond myself, I don't know a single other person who's ever read that book. That's certainly not the reason why people attach a mystical importance to the mountain. It's not because they've read Perrat and they've gotten goofy ideas in their head. Then the middle sentence, Holy Grail, Cathar treasure, Order of the Solar Temple, just shoehorns the Order of the Solar Temple in there, who are a death cult who killed a few hundred people in the 1980s, were a Canadian French cult that went completely bonkers and killed a bunch of folk. But it's got nothing to do with Montsegur. They might as well have put the Manson family on it. So
Mm.
at the moment, the signage is already a mess of people backpedaling about what the meaning of the site is and how to present it. With a lot of with trying to say, well, it's not really about that. And if you're thinking about the Holy Grail, maybe you're deluded. And I think that even that's going to disappear, and they're just going to say, no, it's a French military garrison from the 14th century. Okay, let's leave it at that. It's but people will continue, I hope, to get to climb the mountain. There have been attempts to stop them because yeah, recently they've over the last few years they've landscaped the front of it so that to prevent people gathering around the martyrs memorial, to limit the number of people that can actually approach it. The Martyrs Memorial is the only monument to Catharism. It was raised by private subscription in the 1960s. Has subsequently become the focus of a lot of the pilgrims, but they've deliberately put fences and stuff around it to try to make the area narrower so that large groups can't gather there. They've done the same in the castle. They've put plastic nets across the courtyard again to stop people gathering in the courtyard, and have over the last few years cut all the trees on the top of the mountain, so which also to means there's no shade up there, or and no protection from rain. And I think these are all deliberate moves to
Okay.
prevent people from gathering. It hasn't gone to the same level as Stonehenge, where you literally can't enter the stone ring and have to have a time coded ticket to make certain you don't spend too long around the stone circle. But these moves to basically stop crowds from forming, yeah, to stop people from lingering, is definitely yeah, something that's been gradually implemented here and needs to be resisted. We've seen it in a lot of sites, particularly since the rise of the Magdalenians over the last few years. We have a lot of fans of Mary M out here. And this has led to all kinds of weird scenarios, including Magdalenian on Magdalenian violence. Just it's awkward when you've got too many
I can't even
yeah,
imagine what you mean.
kind of different warring cliques. I mean, a lot of folk go a little funny when they have a revelation. I mean, it's just the same as
Oh,
seeing a UFO. There's a tendency to think that you must be chosen, that
okay.
maybe you are the one. We've had a bunch of different gurus, and that's been going on a while. And then I guess the rise of the popularity of the Mary M story is for a bunch of reasons. I mean, she may have been here, and I'm not saying that she didn't come. And there's a story that in 7 AD, a boat without oars or sails arrives in Saint Marie de la Mer bearing Mary Magdalene, Martha, and Lazarus. And that after the crucifixion, Mary M's meant to have come here to the south and made her way inland from Saint Marie de la Mer, and presumably spent her last days at St. Baum. And the Dominicans claim to have the skull of Mary M, which is encased in silver in the church at Saint Baum. Dominicans are also the folk who administered the Inquisition. So whether we
Wow.
should be taking their word for it or not, I don't know. Moreover, I should add as a footnote, the Dominicans have yet to apologize for it either. There's like 7 centuries of the Inquisition killing people, and we've never had a Truth and Justice Commission, nor have we ever actually had an official apology, which does need to happen eventually. And
That's right.
it's a digression. But yeah, Mary Ann may well have been here, and certainly I think it's highly likely that early Christian missionaries came here, 7 AD, or thereabouts. Folk coming from the Holy Lands would have started filtering through via the Roman trade routes. There was a substantial Roman presence here. I think it's highly likely that from around 7 or 10 AD, a proto-Christian baptismal cult would have started to establish itself. They would have initially, for the first few hundred years, have been rubbing shoulders with the other gods who were already here and strong at the time. Asclepius, the god of the new green leaves, the god of health, or there was a period where Glycon, who was a talking snake that made prophecies, was the avatar of Asclepius. So this went on for a few hundred years, but I'm sure that early Christians would have been increasingly a force, just as they were in Rome, and eventually grew up to the point where they were able to take power. And it's certainly possible that these early Christian missionaries were women, and that they may well have been Christian high priestesses fanning out across the world, because we
Wow.
hear, yeah, I mean, we hear these stories that Mary M, after the crucifixion, came here to France, and we hear also that, of course, she went to Kashmir um, and maybe, yeah, maybe Japan. Everyone likes to think that Christ went to Glastonbury or visited England. And a few years ago, I was lost in a forest in Poland near Lublin, in a place called Wezniak. And in a storm in the forest, I took shelter underneath the porticos of an Orthodox church, and there was a old drunk Polish guy there who proceeded to explain to me how Mary M had come there with Christ after the crucifixion, and started showing it all to me. And I tried to explain to him that they believed the same thing where I was from, and he got very offended because he was sure that she had come to Wezniak.
Wow.
So yeah, so I suspect that there were early Christian missionaries. That they were that maybe I can't imagine Mary M could have been in all of those places,
That's
but
right.
possibly Mary was a title, like a priestess. Possibly there were many Marys.
Yes.
Mm.
I've heard someone say similar about Jesus, actually, the name.
Yeah, it's possible, and it's
Yeah.
also possible that people could have gotten confused over the course of 1,000 years or so, particularly coming from oral tradition. And
Very much.
they could have narrowed the gap between the priestess and the deity until they became one, or until just the memory remained that, yeah, that Christ or Mary M had been there, had somehow touched that spot. But in the present day, it's the same deal. A lot of folk come here, connect with a vision, or connect with some form of the truth, then imagine that they've been chosen to be the ones to communicate this authentic mystery. And as a result, in the last few years, we've seen also people making huge amounts of money out of it, because the you can see how the thought occurs. It's like, oh my God, everything we were taught about Christianity is a lie. They've covered up the God being a woman. They've covered up pretty much the entire role of femininity in the Bible. In the present day, to bring that back, to try to reintroduce a more authentic Christianity. You can see the cash registers turning in people's eyes, and the thought, my God, we can create a pyramid power structure. I could be Pope. And they're off, and then you've got suddenly another Mary Magdalene in the same village, or two or three, and the next thing you know, you've got warring Mary M's. They can't coexist any more than male Jesuses can. You try getting three men who think they're Jesus in the same room, and it doesn't work.
Oh, humans. What a
And
paradoxical adventure.
yeah, and they get catty, and end up going to war. And as a result, here in the south, in the last 12 months, and last, yeah, it has been pretty much in the last year, we've seen the so-called Cave of Mary Magdalene opposite Rennes-le-Chateau blocked off, closed with a fence, and legal warnings that people aren't even allowed to approach it. The sources in a number of areas have also been locked, barred. Sources in Campan also closed in the last year. The largest and most beautiful tree in the green labyrinth in the forest of Nibias was felled. Cut down by the Mairie. If similar to the attempts to control people, stop them from gathering on the mountaintop. There's been a backlash, partly because of the growth of the yeah of certainly with the closure of the Magdalene caves. It's to stop people from gathering there. It's deliberately a move. No, it's not even coming directly from patriarchy. The caves were closed by the town council, largely New Agers and largely ladies who were which yeah kind of again amazed me, possibly acting as agents of a
Yes,
larger joined up plan. But I was yeah fairly surprised by
that's
some of the
strange.
folk involved.
How would they see that it benefits them to do that?
Um, Beats me. I think the Rennie is the one who are responsible for that. The inhabitants of the tiny village of Rennes-le-Château that yeah surveys the zone and the region in which these Magdalen caves and do like to feel that they own that entire area. And I
Okay.
guess it makes them feel empowered to be able to put a fence on it and to lock it off. Presumably somebody has the key. And I don't doubt that if you grease the right hand and pay the right people, they'll probably unlock the door and take you in. But I resent the notion of anyone putting fences and locks on geo features to begin with, or claiming ownership. And a great many cults and secret societies attempt to do that. The
Hmm.
initiatory caves in Usat Laban are also been fought over. The European Rosicrucians tried to take control of them and put a fence and a lock gate on them about 10 years ago, and the villagers rebelled and tore the fence off the cave and hold it down the valley and stuff. And it also been fought over by yeah sectarian I guess in many cases new age rivalry between yeah different cliques that have embedded themselves here.
And on it goes. Richard, you are full of the most fascinating stories. Have you authored how many books?
Well, only one real one,
Okay.
which is OTTO RAHN GRAIL HUNTER,
Yes.
which is an opus. I hope to have another one out this year.
Good.
And yeah, I hope that it's finally breaks the dam on the material because I've got a lot on my hard drive. But effectively, I was a filmmaker. But when I realized that people were trying to suppress or erase the story, it galvanized me to put the book together. The material for OTTO RAHN GRAIL HUNTER has been gathered through 30 years of my research. But because I'm also telling the story of Otto, who did the work back in the 1920s, it's more like 100 years of research. Otto Rahn was the German Jewish Grail historian who really broke the story of the Cathars and the story of Montsegur, who researched this, looking for the Grail back in the late 1920s, and
So it was
eventually wrote a
him who
book
made
about.
that. Sorry, it was him who made that public knowledge about the Cathars.
Um, Pretty much outside of France.
Okay,
He was very influenced by some of the French literature that was around at the time. The initial connection between the Cathars and the Grails had already been made by French writers,
of course.
and I think this made a big impact on Otto. But his book Crusade Against the Grail was a bestseller in Germany in about 1934. And he told the story in an accessible way that popularized it. And unfortunately for him, this brought him to the attention of the Third Reich. Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS, loved Otto's book, and demanded that he be brought to Berlin and inducted him straight into the SS, despite the fact that Otto was gay and had Jewish roots, which effectively made his position untenable after a few years.
Yeah.
And but yeah, for about 3 or 4 years, Otto became the Third Reich's official Grail hunter. They sent him forth to effectively try and claim the Grail myth. Yeah, for the Nazis to serve as a part of the ideological underpinnings of the Holocaust, which it's ironic to me that in the present day, people are seeking to do the same.
Mm.
That in the present day, ironically, the state of Israel would love to find proof of ancient Jewish usage of Temple Mount because it's part of the ideological underpinnings for the Palestinian genocide. We can see again how the same ambiguous symbol of the Grail can be deployed to exterminate either side. Yeah, Otto was in a ultimately an untenable situation, and it killed him. And yeah, Otto died on the German-French border in 1939, trying to escape from Germany. And his
Yeah.
research was basically erased because of his connections he painted with his association with Nazism. So by the time I first got on the trail in back in the 1990s in the 20th century, Otto's work hadn't been translated, and at that point was still only available in yeah, it's a original copy or on order from dodgy right wing yeah neo-Nazi publishers. And when I finally managed to get through reading Otto's account, still then in German, I was yeah enlightened. Realized that his work had been yeah unfairly ignored and suppressed. I started trying to back engineer it and yeah, patch it back into the mixing board of human consciousness, uh,
Mm.
which I think the castle was grateful for. I'm of the opinion that the White Lady liked Otto, and whatever the forces at work in Montsegur was grateful that I'd rescued his research.
Yes. What an unbelievable story. Um, but factual, real life. I had no idea how all of these threads and worlds were connected until I heard about your book. And so, aside from getting your book and reading your book and understanding um, some history that is currently, you know, there's attempts to suppress some of it, how can we, listening to you here, Richard, support you in some way in your path? Because you've been so generous with your time and your energy and your wisdom. Is there any way that those of us that are listening can be of service to you?
Well, I don't be of service to me, but be of service to the Grail. It's and I think also make up your own minds, ask questions, don't take things for granted, and if possible, make the pilgrimage. Visit Montsegur. You can't actually visit these places without being changed by them. Don't trust me, trust the place. How it feels at the end of the day. All words are kind of fall away. It's there's things which are true, which have always been true, and the Inquisition spent 7 centuries vaporizing all the user manuals. But the things that they couldn't change is the sun, the moon, and the stars, the mountains, the trees, the place itself, the places remain, and the different times of year, the solstice and the full moons land with their original power, and yeah, where the spirit has breathed, it remains. And I think these things maybe happen as lessons to remind us that no price is too much in the quest to try to perfect oneself, to try to do better in little ways, in any way one can. And I think what the Cathars tried to do was to live better lives and and to improve themselves, to try to be kind not only to each other and not only to find peace between men and women, but I would dearly love to see peace between the species too. I'd really love to dearly love to see animals acknowledged as fellow sentient beings and treated as such by the human race, because I do believe our world will cease to exist unless we finally get that right. So yeah, if folk can Yeah, I think served me best by being kinder to each other, and in particular, be kinder to things which are weaker than yourself. If we're judged at all, we're judged according to how we treat things which are smaller under our power, which are smaller and weaker than us. So
You're right.
if
That's,
they
yes. What an incredibly beautiful answer. Richard, I'm so grateful to have come across you. It's just incredible to learn from you. And I'm very grateful to indulging my curiosity around all of these things. And I'm sure everyone's going to get a lot out of this episode today. So thank you so much for meeting with me.
uh, thank you so much for having me on, and do try to visit the region for yourself someday.
I would
Strong
really,
recommend.
yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mm. Thank you for sharing this episode if it's moved you, and know that saving or sharing it around, it genuinely helps to spread this message and also to attract more interesting speakers to join the Beyond Patriarchal Sex conversations. And there is much more to come, so keep tuning into these weekly episodes so that we can all be part of shifting division into connection for ourselves and for the coming generations.